Salma Khan, a housewife from Mumbai, India. Nutmeg is commonly added in food in many Indian recipes. Is it permissible to add nutmeg in the food? A similar question is asked by another sister. Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I am Varda from Islamabad, Pakistan. My question is about food that has garam masala, that is spices. Is it halal to consume it, knowing that some garam masalas, some spices, have nutmeg in them? Also, what will be the ruling of eating food from restaurants, Muslim neighborhood, or at weddings, not knowing if their spices had nutmeg or not? My other question is about processed food that says spices as ingredients but doesn't list them. Will it be halal to eat them? Thank you. The first questioner asked that is eating nutmeg permissible? Nutmeg in Arabic is called Jawzatut Tib or Jawz al-Hind. Maybe because it started coming from India. And nutmeg is produced in India. It is grown in the southern part of India, in the states of Kerala and Tamil Nadu. But it is not the largest producer of nutmeg in the world. The largest producer and exporter of nutmeg is Indonesia. But maybe since it was exported through India, that's the reason the Arabic word Jawz al-Hind has evolved. Nutmeg is the seed of genus Myristica, or it is the seed of Myristica fragrans. And nutmeg is basically used as a spice and is put in food and delicacies like sweet dishes. It's put in cakes, it's put in pastries, it's put in a variety of food, especially in the Indian subcontinent, in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, or in the southern eastern countries, that including Indonesia and other countries. It is commonly used in the Indian subcontinent. It is used in baked foods. It is used in pastries, in puddings, in cakes. It is used in cooked food, in meat, in vegetable, in variety, and it's a common spice. So the major use of nutmeg is as a spice, and it gives that flavor, because of which even the Westerners, the European, they came all the way to Southeast Asia, to India and to Indonesia, mainly because of finding the spice, and one of them is nutmeg. Nutmeg is also used for medicinal purposes. It has got narcotic effect, and it's used in some of the psychological disorders for treatment, and it has got its own medicinal purposes. Nutmeg, if taken in large quantity, has hallucinogenic effects. It has got narcotic effects. It can cause ecstasy, can cause drowsiness, it can cause euphoria if taken in large quantity. But the major use of nutmeg is for spices. And the second use is for medicinal purposes. It's not used normally as a drug for ecstasy, but it can if taken in large quantities. But this nutmeg is of different type, not the same as the one we use for the spices, but natural. But if even the nutmeg that's in spices taken in large quantity, in a particular proportion, in a particular type, in a style, it can cause hallucinogenic effects. It can cause narcotic effects, and its effect is somewhat similar to hashish and can cause euphoria, can cause ecstasy. What is the ruling on the eating of nutmeg? As far as using nutmeg as food is concerned, there are basically two groups of scholars. The opinion is divided. One group of scholars says that all the scholars unanimously agree that having nutmeg in large quantity in which there is hallucinogenic effects or narcotic effects, in which a person feels drowsy or a person feels euphoria or ecstasy, it is haram. So there is no difference of opinion as far as having nutmeg in large quantity which has hallucinogenic effects. There is no difference of opinion. The difference of opinion is in having nutmeg in food as a spice. As far as eating nutmeg as a spice in food in small quantities, which doesn't have hallucinogenic effects, the scholars are divided into two opinions. One group of scholars says that because it hallucinates or has an effect of narcosis in large quantity, it is even prohibited in small quantity. Based on the hadith of beloved Prophet ﷺ of Ibn Majah, it's a Sahih hadith, point number 4, hadith number 3393, in which the Prophet said, anything which intoxicates in large quantity is even prohibited in small quantity. So based on this, there is one prominent group of scholars, and mainly the scholars of the Maliki madhab, the Shafi and the Hanbali. These three schools of thought, mostly they say that eating nutmeg even as a spice in food is haram, based on this hadith. And the other group of scholars says that eating in large quantity, where it causes hallucinogen effect, it is haram, but in small quantity put in food, it doesn't cause hallucinogenic effects and doesn't cause intoxication, so it is permitted. Let us analyze these two groups of scholars. And let me tell you, the majority of the scholars belong to the opinion that nutmeg, even in small quantity, as a spice in food is haram. Based on the hadith of Ibn Majah, volume 4, hadith number 3393, that anything that intoxicates in large quantity is even prohibited in small quantity. I'm not aware whether nutmeg was available at the time of the Prophet or the time of the Sahabas. There is no evidence. But later on, several centuries later on, the discussion on this issue started. And we know of the great scholar, Hafiz ibn Hajar al-Haytami. There are two Hafiz ibn Hajar. The other one is Asqalani, but this is the other one, and both are very famous. Somewhere around 947 Hijri, about maybe 500 years back. And in his fatwa, he says that there were differences of opinion between the scholars of the Harmain land. That time Saudi was there, but today it is Saudi Arabia. In the land of Harmain and the scholars of Misr, scholars of Egypt. Because the scholars of Egypt, they use nutmeg as a medicinal purposes, so they differed. So there were differences of opinion, but he himself, Hafiz ibn Hajar al-Haytami, he says that it has intoxicating effects if had in large quantity. Therefore, even in small quantity, a spice in food is haram. He was very clear cut. He's a great scholar. So he was of the opinion that even in small quantity, even in food, because of the hadith of Ibn Majah, volume 4, hadith number 3393, in which the Prophet said anything intoxicates in large quantity is prohibited in small quantity. But we come to know from this great scholar that there was difference of opinion even 500 years back. Then we also have the great scholar, Shaykh al-Islam, Ibn Daqiq al-Eid, who says that even having nutmeg in food in small quantity is prohibited because in large quantity it has intoxicating effects. So based on that, on the same hadith of the Prophet, anything intoxicates in large quantity is even prohibited in small quantity. He said it is haram even in small quantity. And there are many scholars, the list is long, but I've quoted two great scholars, and majority of the scholars of opinion based on this hadith that nutmeg even as spice in small quantity in food is prohibited. Let us try and understand the opinion of the second group of scholars. The second group of scholars who agree that nutmeg in large quantity, which causes intoxicating effects and hallucination, is haram, but who say that in small quantity in spices, which does not intoxicate, is permitted. What they do, unlike the first group of scholars, the first group of scholars unanimously put all intoxicating food or substances into muskir. But the second group, they divide into different categories. They say that muskir is only liquid intoxicants. And give the example of khamar. That's when the Prophet specifically said khamar. So all intoxicants which are liquid like alcohol, beer, whiskey, vodka, these are khamar and they fall under the first category. And in this category alone, the Prophet said, anything which intoxicates in large quantity, the hadith of Ibn Majah, volume number 4, hadith number 3393, that anything which intoxicates in large quantity is even prohibited in small quantity. But they have divided into other groups, some scholars in two groups. The second category they call is mukhaddir. And they say mukhaddir is the intoxicating substance, it may be solid, etc., which if had in large quantity will intoxicate you. But these substances sometimes can also be used for medicinal purposes. For example, morphine. We know morphine is intoxicating, but it can be used as anesthesia, and there are other drugs which can be used as anesthesia. So if used for medicinal purposes, where it relieves the pain, etc., so here it becomes permissible. And some scholars, they divide into third group, called as mufattir. Some in four groups. Time will not permit to go into details, but the second group of scholars, they do not put all intoxicants in one category, like the first group of scholars. Some scholars have said in two groups, some in three, some in four. So when they say that the groups of intoxicants can be divided into two categories, the first is muskir, which is liquid intoxicants like khamar, wine, whiskey, vodka, anything liquid which you drink. For that ruling, the hadith of the Prophet of Ibn Majah, volume number 4, hadith number 3393, anything which intoxicates in large quantity is even prohibited in small quantities. But as far as the other second, third or fourth group is concerned, this ruling has to be analyzed. But the second group unanimously agrees that any intoxicants, whether it be solid, whether it be other forms of substance, whether it be mukhaddir, if you have in a quantity which intoxicates you, which causes hallucinogenic effects, which causes narcotic effects, it is haram. There is no difference of opinion. But the other opinion that if it is used for medicinal purpose, for a benefit, it becomes permissible. And they also include nutmeg in the second category called as mukhaddir. That means if you have a small quantity of nutmeg in food, it adds flavor to it, and in no way can it intoxicate a person. Even if you have, when you put in that food, if you have a large quantity of that food, whether it be pastry, whether it be sweet dish, whether it be delicacies, whether it be food, whether you have 1 kilo, 5 kilo, 10 kilo, it will not intoxicate you. So based on that, they say that this is in the second category of mukhaddir. So therefore, we cannot say it is always haram. If it is had in small quantity, which does not intoxicate and adds to the flavor, this nutmeg is permissible. And in the second group also, you have great scholars, though the first group is a larger number, but in the second group also, you have Imam Ar-Ramli, who said that nutmeg, if had in large quantity, which intoxicates, is prohibited, but if it is had put in the food in small quantity for flavor, it is permissible. And here we have to understand that the nutmeg that we have to put in the food is a different type altogether. Normally people don't use it for a drug, for ecstasy. That nutmeg is of a different type. But I'm not saying that if you have in large quantity, even the nutmeg put in food, in large quantity can intoxicate you. But you don't find that people normally do that. There was the 8th Medical Fiqh Council held in Kuwait in May 1995. And in this Fiqh Council, you have the experts coming from all over the world. And in this 8th Medical Islamic Fiqh Council held in Kuwait in May 1995, they had scholars of fiqh coming together, even who are scientists, who are doctors, who are expert in the field. They gathered together and they said that if it is from muqaddir, that is something which intoxicates if you have in large quantity, but if it is used for medicinal purposes during operations and otherwise, it is permissible. They specifically even took the name of nutmeg. That nutmeg, if had in small quantity to add flavor to the food, it is permissible. However, if it's had in large quantity, where it causes hallucinogenic effects or narcotic effects, where there's ecstasy or euphoria or drowsiness, it is prohibited. And imagine in this fiqh council, you have top scholars. And but natural, it was lately, hardly about 26 years back. And science is advanced, so there are scientists, as Quran says in Surah Nahl chapter 16, verse 43, and Surah Anbiya chapter number 21, verse number 7. Fas'alu ahli zikri in kuntum la ta'lamun. So these scholars, besides the scholars of fiqh, they also have understanding of science, of technology, and of medicine. So this, it's not an opinion of one particular person or one particular scholar. A group well versed in this field, so they cannot be neglected. I do agree with the first group of scholars that say nutmeg given in food is prohibited. They were saying there are a large number of scholars, great scholars, but you can't just overlook what is said by this Islamic Fiqh Medical Council. I'll give you a name of another great scholar by the name of Dr. Wahab Az-Zuhaili. He's very famous. He has written volumes of books on fatwa. And he also says that nutmeg, if put in the food, a small quantity, for flavor, and it doesn't cause any intoxication, it is permissible. However, if it's eaten directly in large quantity and causes hallucinogenic effects or intoxicates you, then it is prohibited. And Dr. Wahab Az-Zuhaili is a very famous scholar. So here we have two group of scholars, and I do agree that in the first group who say nutmeg even as a spice in food is prohibited, that's a larger group and a bigger group. But even the second group cannot be neglected. And among the late scholars with all the science and evidence, you have many people who have agreed with the second fatwa also. And I, being a doctor and coming from the background of science, I do agree even with the view of the second group of scholar, but there's something like fatwa and something like taqwa. So if you ask personally, I would advise the Muslims that when in doubt, leave it out. I would advise the Muslims that don't put nutmeg in your food. Though both the fatwas have their own value, both cannot be rejected, both have the argument. The second fatwa backed with science, etc. But both group of scholars have their own reasoning and logic, which cannot be just put aside. But there is a ruling which is known as that when there is a way of exiting from the differences, al-khuruj min al-khilaf, exiting from the difference. It's a qaida of fiqh, that when you can exit from the difference, especially when both the rulings are of top authentic scholars. So best is to take that side in which no one will object. For example, the first group of scholars says that even putting in food is haram, eating large quantities is haram, even putting in food in small quantities is haram. The second group of scholars says eating nutmeg in large quantities is haram, but small quantity in food is permissible. But if someone follows the first group of scholar, no scholar from the second group will say that not putting nutmeg in food is haram. They will not say. They say it's permissible, but eating is not fard. So if you follow the first group of scholar, you are exiting from the difference. Al-khuruj min al-khilaf. So, especially when the evidence is quite solid on both the sides, we put this ruling. This ruling will not be put if the difference of opinion and one group is based on Sahih Hadith, the other on Zaif Hadith, then you follow the Sahih. If the difference of opinion is clear cut that when you put the usul of fiqh and of all the rulings, etc., and it's evident, then you don't use these rules that exiting from the difference. This is only used when both the arguments are strong. And this is a good example, whether nutmeg can be put in food as a spice or not. So this is a good example. So here, one comes fatwa and one comes taqwa. So though I agree that both the groups are correct, and I wouldn't say they're wrong, but I use that when in doubt, leave it out. I would use this qaida here of fiqh, that al-khuruj min al-khilaf, exiting from the difference. So therefore, I would advise the Muslim brothers and sisters, even if it's tasty, when in doubt, leave it out. So I would advise the Muslim brothers and sisters that don't put nutmeg in your food. But as a da'i, I have to give both the opinions, though I may agree with both the group of scholars in their own way, but I would agree putting off that avoiding is the best. So I would request all the Muslims, brothers and sisters, that you should not put nutmeg in your food as a spice. That answers the question of the first sister. But the question of the second sister was different. She asked the question that can I have garam masala? Garam masala is the Indian name, for spices, like a powder, which is put in food. India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Indian subcontinent. That can I use garam masala, which contains nutmeg? And her question was, can I go to restaurants? Can I go to Muslim neighbors in weddings? I don't know nutmeg is used or not, so what should I do? Now the reply to the second question would be slightly different. And this question that can nutmeg be used in garam masala, the answer would be slightly different. And I would like to give you the ruling of Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, importing nutmeg is haram. There are few countries where nutmeg is banned. It's in Saudi Arabia, it's in Kuwait, and few of the Gulf countries. So very few countries in the world have banned nutmeg based on saying that it has effects like drug, etc. But in Saudi Arabia, you can import spices which contain nutmeg up to 20%. So if the percentage of nutmeg in spices is 20% or below, it is permissible. So to the question of the sister, can you use garam masala or spices which contain nutmeg? Don't use pure nutmeg powder, may be available. But most of the garam masala, most of the spices that are there, if they contain nutmeg, it is in small quantity. And most of them, they contain less than 20%. So to the reply to your question, that if nutmeg is there in a small quantity, in garam masala you can use it. Now why is the difference here? And in this answer to mine, even the first group of scholars inshallah will agree with my statement, because as some of you may be aware, that most of the soft drinks, the aerated soft drinks like Pepsi, Fanta, 7-Up, Coke, they contain small amount of alcohol. Many may be aware, many may not be aware. But when research is done, the research says that every 1 liter of Coke or Pepsi or the aerated drink, they contain about 10 milligram of alcohol. That is 0.001%. I have not heard of any fatwa of any authentic scholar saying that drinking aerated drink is haram. Not a single. Yes, it does contain alcohol, but it's a small quantity. Here they don't use the fatwa that anything which intoxicates in large quantity is prohibited in small quantity. Why? What they put the ruling that if you drink Pepsi, even 10 cans, you will not be intoxicated. Even 20 cans, it may be bad for health. It may be junk food. It may spoil your health. There may be excessive sugar. Many disadvantages. But no scholar would say it's haram, because if you have Pepsi or Fanta or 7-Up or Coke in large quantity, it does not intoxicate you. So the hadith of the Prophet of Ibn Majah, volume 4, hadith number 3393, is applicable here. if you drink anything in large quantity and if it intoxicates you, it is prohibited even in small quantity. That means if you have Pepsi, 10 cans, 20 cans, 100 cans, it may spoil your health because of the sugar, because of the other aspects, but it doesn't intoxicate you. Imagine if I put one drop, or if I put one bottle, if I pour one bottle of alcohol in a lake, will the lake become haram? And the answer is no. Because after the one bottle of alcohol is put in the lake, and if it mixes and if you drink water from that lake, it will not be haram. So based on that, they say it is permissible. Similarly, the Saudi government and the ulama, they have agreed that if you have nutmeg in small quantity in a powder in garam masala or spices, if you have that powder in large quantity, surely it will not intoxicate you. Even if you add it to the food, and if you have a large quantity of food, that food will not intoxicate you. So regarding the question of the second sister from Pakistan, that having nutmeg in spices mixed, and normally it's in small quantity, these spices don't become haram. So I hope the answer is complete. That I would request that my brothers and sisters, that whichever group of scholars you believe in, but don't use or avoid using nutmeg in your food as a spice directly. But if it's in garam masala, if it's in spices, if it's a small quantity, 20% or less, I feel no scholar will object to the view of using it in spices, whether you go to restaurants, whether you go to weddings, if it's used in spices, it is perfectly fine. And when you go to a Muslim house, it is normal, you take it for granted that the food that they're serving you is halal, unless there is proof it is haram. So based on that, I feel that using in spices in small quantity, it doesn't go against the rule of both of these group of scholars. So in spices, if it's in small quantity, nutmeg in the spices, surely it will not intoxicate, even if you have in large quantity, whether the spice or whether the food. So I feel there is no problem. And as far as the answer to the second question is that it is permissible if it's in small quantity in spices. Hope this answers the question.